Hey, I'm golf broadcaster Matt Adams. The updated and expanded second edition of my book, The Golf Round I'll Never Forget, Golf's Biggest Stars Recall Their Finest Moments, is now available. Readers can expect to march with Arnie's Army at the 1960 U.S. Open, relive Jack Nicklaus's remarkable 1986 Masters win, and be amazed by the Tiger Slam. The Golf Round I'll Never Forget, Golf's Biggest Stars Recall Their Finest Moments. Pick it up where fine books are sold, including BarnesandNoble.com and Amazon.com.
This day in sports history. It's April 17th, and on this day in 1953, it's not the longest, but it may be the most famous home run hit in Major League Baseball history. Now, if you have ever heard the term tape measure home run, then this is where the term originated. So on this day, it was the New York Yankees playing at the Washington Senators Griffith Stadium. Mickey Mantle was a 21-year-old slugger coming off a year when he was third in the MVP voting and just coming into his own as a Yankee. In Mick's own words, the Senators Park, Griffith Stadium, was a tough place to hit one out. There was a 90-foot-tall wall in center field, and the wind always seemed to be blowing in. But on this day, it was a little different. There was a little breeze blowing out. Mantle was a switch hitter, and he came to the plate as a righty against the left-handed pitcher Chuck Stobbs. Stobbs delivered a very meaty fastball to Mantle, who connected, sending the ball over the wall in left center on its way out of the ballpark. It ricocheted off a beer sign and continued over 5th Street and landed in the backyard of a house. In the press box, New York Yankee PR man Red Patterson was flabbergasted, and he said, "That one's got to be measured." So he ran from the press box, out of the ballpark, and down the street where he saw the ball was heading. He saw a 10-year-old Donald Dunaway with a baseball in his hand. Now, the kid was wondering who had hit it. Patterson told him that Mantle had belted it out of the ballpark, and then he asked Donnie to show him where he found it, to which he took Patterson to the impact in the backyard of 434 Oakdale Street. He then paced off the distance to the outside wall of the stadium. Now, he did not use a tape measure. Instead, he used the dimensions of the park and his pacing to come up with 565 feet on this Mickey Mantle home run, which would have been further if it had not glanced off the beer sign. And even though no tape measure was used to actually measure it, from that point on, any long home run became known as a tape measure shot. So the Guinness Book of World Records lists Babe Ruth's 575-foot home run hit July 18, 1921, as the longest ever hit. But there are folks who say that Mick's 565-foot shot on this day is only his own 7th longest. At one point, the recognized record was a 634-foot shot Mantle hit in 1960. But after investigation into reports and calculations, it was discredited. And since we're talking long balls, let's go back to this date in 1976, when Philadelphia third baseman Mike Schmidt hit 4 consecutive home runs to help the Phillies erase a 13-2 deficit and turn it into an 18-16 extra-inning slugfest win over the Chicago Cubs. The Cubs built their 11-run lead in the first 4 innings, and when Schmidt came to the plate in the 5th, he had a 2-run blast, followed that up with a solo shot in the 7th, hit a 3-run homer in the 8th, and with the game tied at 15 in the 10th, hit another 2-run dinger. Schmidt was the 10th player to hit 4 home runs in a game, but only the 4th to hit them in consecutive plate appearances. The teams combined for 43 hits on this day and a total of 9 home runs between the Phillies and the Cubs. It should be noted that Schmidt benefited from a pretty stiff 20-mile-per-hour wind blowing out of the ballpark that day. And since we're talking about Philadelphia, on this day in 1972, it was a promotional flop for the ages. The Phillies liked to start the year off in a daring way. In 1971, a backup catcher for the Phillies caught the ceremonial first pitch thrown from a hovering helicopter. Well, in an effort to top that in 1972, the Phillies arranged for a man deemed Kite Man to slide off a ramp, take flight with the use of a special kite attached to his back and soar to the mound to deliver the first pitch. The guy that they hired to do that was an experienced skydiver who jumped off cliffs and soared with the use of his special kite. However, that plan hit a snag. There was a baseball strike that delayed the start of the '72 season, and when opening day for the Phillies finally rolled around, the original kite man they had hired was not available. So, in a bit of a pinch at that point, the Phillies PR staff hired Richard Johnson, who owned a hardware store by day and on occasion was known to fly a kite in shows. Let's just emphasize for a moment that he was not taking flight himself at these particular shows. So, here on opening day, with more than 38,000 people watching, Johnson, as Kite Man, stood at the top of the center field seats. The idea was for Kite Man to hop on a 140-foot-long ramp, slide down it, and once at the end, take flight, fly gracefully to the pitcher's mound, and throw the ceremonial first pitch to Philly Mayor Frank Rizzo behind home plate. But Johnson, the stand-in Kite Man, started having a lot of doubts about the stunt, the windy conditions, his life choices, and he froze. The public address announcer repeatedly introduced Kite Man, but Johnson was terrified and didn't want to move. Soon, and this should come as no surprise, Phillies fans started to boo the guy, and realizing that he didn't have much of a choice in the matter, Johnson began to slide. Slowly. And I picture it sort of like the agony of defeat guy, but about halfway down the slide, a gust of wind blows through. It knocked him off the ramp. He crashed and tumbled into the seats for several rows and then into the upper deck railing. He wasn't injured too badly, and this again should come as no surprise, Phillies fans booed louder. Johnson managed to disentangle himself and now out of options and a long way from home plate. He decided to throw the ball 450 feet to home plate. It went about 30 into the Phillies bullpen. So at that point, and this, again, really should come as no surprise, the Phillies booed louder than ever. And while there was obvious relief from the Philadelphia PR and front office staff that Kite Man had not plummeted to his death, Chairman Bill Giles made sure to note to the inquiring media folks that Johnson had never practiced the stunt, even though he was given the opportunity for a test run with no booing fans present. Johnson apparently replied that if he was going to kill himself in the stunt, he wanted more people to witness it. In 1860, it was the first recognized World Championship boxing match between 6'2", 195-pound American John Heenan against the English champion and diminutive 5'8", 150-pound Tom Sayers. It took place in Hampshire Field, southwest of London. And so, as I've talked about with these long-ago fights, they lasted inexorable amounts of time. This bout started at 7:30 in the morning, and it went on for 2 hours and 27 minutes, or 42 rounds. Even worse, it ended in a draw, with police stopping the fight. The two men did split the 400-pound purse, but this fight is actually one of the most influential. Several days later, new codes of conduct for fighting were called for, and soon came the dozen rules written by the London Amateur Athletic Club that are still in place today, such as 3-minute rounds, 10-second counts for any fighter knocked down, pads in the corners, and gloves. Now, that was to make fighting legal in England, but the use of gloves would not actually become commonplace for another 30 years. And in 1977, the LA Kings' Don Kozak scored the quickest goal in an NHL playoff game, just 6 seconds from the drop of the puck. The Kings beat Boston 7-4, but Boston would go on to win the series in 6 games. And today's non-sports fun fact: bananas are radioactive. It's ever so slight. In fact, you are more radioactive than a banana, but with the presence of potassium-40, bananas are indeed radioactive. That's all for today. I'll have more tomorrow on This Day in Sports History. This has been an original Thrive Suite production.
Hey there, sports history fan. This is Arnie Chapman, a.k.a. the Football History Dude, and I hope that you enjoyed this recent episode presented by the Sports History Network and were able to learn some good old-fashioned sports history knowledge nuggets. I started the Sports History Network back in 2020 with the mission to help podcasters find a community of like-minded sports history nerds, as well as helping aspiring podcasters to start their own shows. We have a little bit over 30 shows on the network right now covering all sorts of sports history, but as far as I'm concerned, we're just at the toothpick in the ocean moment, that can't even figure it out because there's so much more coming. We wanted to create the ultimate headquarters for sports yesteryear, starting with Podcast Network and our website, but we're going to continue to move into other mediums as well. And here's the cool part, because we want you to be part of our team. So if you're interested in starting your own podcast, or maybe being a guest on one of our shows, or who knows, maybe even writing an article for us over on the website. Seriously, all you gotta do is reach out to us on the contact page over at sportshistorynetwork.com. You can be as technologically savvy as a Neanderthal tapping on a stone trying to figure out this whole hieroglyphics thing back in the day. Again, it doesn't matter, because even if you don't understand the whole podcast space, we have a production team that can pretty much help you out with doing everything. All you gotta do, head over to sportshistorynetwork.com, head to the contact page, fill it out. That message goes right to me, and I'll reach out to you as soon as I can. But for now, dude, I'm through if you're through.